People who have worked at Goodwill or other thrift stores, etc., and processed donations, what's the craziest thing you found? I had a mate who worked in one of the bigger Lifeline stores in Australia. A woman came into the store with 5 large clear plastic storage boxes and asked to donate them. He looked inside of the boxes and it was thousands of beautifully hand-painted Warhammer pieces. He was shocked and asked her why. They were her son's and she couldn't keep them in the house anymore since his death. My friend said he couldn't accept the donation. He said the whole collection was worth a lot of money. She had no idea. He asked her for all her details and asked if he could try to sell it for her. She agreed. After his shift, he went home and took photos of everything and posted it online in an Australian Warhammer forum. Within a couple of weeks, everything was sold. He called her and she met him at the store. He told her he had sold it to collectors all around Australia who loved her son's work. He handed her roughly $12,000. She cried, he cried. She offered him half, he said no. She told him she would donate his half to a charity in her son's name and his name. He said it was the best thing he had ever done in his life. Story 2. Didn't work there, but was about 5 IO, and my mom brought me and my siblings with her to Goodwill. She raised us alone, didn't have a lot of money. This was essentially a school clothes trip. She was just trying to get in and get out. We had strict rules not to ask for a toy or frankly just don't ask for anything. This is a necessity trip only. Naturally, that lasted long enough for us to walk through the automatic doors. My brother went one way, my sister another, and I headed straight for an enormous basket of wallets. I had made up my mind that I needed a wallet and the only place I could beg with any hope to get one was secondhand. I picked up one. Didn't like the pockets. Picked up another. Wasn't a fan of zippers. I hated the sound of Velcro, so that eliminated many options in the basket. Eventually, I brought my carefully scrutinized selection to Mom, who was already overwhelmed by my siblings' finds that she only told me no a few times before she relented. It cost her $2. We loaded our sacks of clothes and my precious new wallet into our van and started for home. I remember going through all of the pockets like I was performing a dissection, picturing what I could put here and what was supposed to go there. At some point, I found a slot that was inside of a pocket that was stiff, as if it was never used often. I poked at it enough to separate the fabric and found a bill inside, intricately folded into a tiny square. Before I even realized exactly what it was, I had ripped it out and held it out over the middle seat in the van, waving frantically and practically bouncing in my seat. "Mom, look, my wallet has money." It was 4 $20 bills, total of $80. I'll never forget the stunned yell. An absolutely magical, gleeful laugh my mom let out. My siblings and I joined in, and we didn't stop smiling and talking about it the whole way home. That $80 wasn't much at all, but it was everything for us on that day. Mom let me keep a $20. I couldn't even tell you what I spent it on, but I still remember how that wallet smelled. Story 3. A sword used by a Japanese officer in Wabiwu. A suitcase full of adult toys. A coin collection worth nearly $2,000 accidentally left in a cupboard that was donated. A photo album of someone's wedding was donated amongst the belongings of the pastor that married the couple after he passed. The bride happened to be someone I went to school with. I tend to sort books at my store, so have found a few odd things in there. Cash as bookmarks, about $150. A book with carved pages to conceal some jewels and gemstones, a few first edition books on agriculture from the 1800s, lots of handwritten recipes, personal letters, and my favorite, a letter sent in the last mail delivery from Hong Kong before the British returned it to China, fixed with every stamp available at the time, and mint versions of each of the stamps enclosed. Story 4. I worked for a nonprofit for seniors that had a charity shop in it. People often just dropped off boxes of stuff they found in their parents' attic. One box had a bunch of letters. Some of them were from Wabuwi, when the man was stationed at Camp Carson in Colorado, and one of them must have been something they were keeping from an older generation. It was a 19 letter proposing marriage. It was so romantic. He fell in love with her when they went ice skating together. He included an advertisement for some houses they could buy. They were really nice houses, selling for about $1,500. Now, story 5. So, I worked for a charity, we picked up old clothes, etc., and sold them in bulk to a thrift chain. When we unloaded the truck, it was common to toss the store employees the bags, and they would catch them before stacking them on racks. Well, one time, some idiot put a big chef's knife in a bag of clothes. The store employee caught the garbage bag of clothes, wrapped his arms around it as he caught it, and proceeded to stab himself in the arm. After that, the policies were changed. We had to put the bags at the edge of the truck for them to take off, because our insurance didn't cover us off the truck, and theirs didn't cover them in it. Story 6. I used to sweep the parking lot of a Goodwill, and they would toss very interesting stuff in the dumpster. Hundreds of books, like really expensive ones. Leather-bound sets of classical works from the 1920s. Early prints of sci-fi novels. I found a nice collectible copy of Dune recently. Family Bibles stacked thick with memories. Food dehydrators, paintings, collectible sports memorabilia, super valuable vintage tools and fixtures. Most of it is just stuff that nobody bothered checking the value on before chucking it out, and it's really sad. I found a destroyed collection of old Spalding baseball bats, the oldest being from the 30s. They were left in the dumpster in standing water for days at least. It's sad to see things like that go, maybe because at one point someone loved them very much, and someone else decided that all the care it took to collect these treasures was a waste. Story 7. Love letters between two people. From the late 1800s, multiple death letters and one death tape, and many diaries. One diary, specifically, was written by a gay man going to med school in the 70s in San Fran. It spans 10 years and has a first-person account of his feelings the day Harvey Milk was assassinated. I used to process donations at this thrift store, so I was seeing everything first. A lot of times when people die, their family members will drop everything off, so we have to sort through and figure out what we can and cannot sell. Personal things like letters and diaries can't be sold, but at the same time they seem so special it's hard to throw them away. When I quit that job, I took a giant box of all this personal memorabilia with me and had a bonfire where I read every single letter, note, diary, and then burned them. I burned everything except the diary, letters, and dyed tape I mentioned. I have those all sitting in a drawer in my closet. I still sit down and read them sometimes. Another edit. The dyed tape was so disturbing, I actually separated the tape from the tape recorder, so I couldn't easily play it anymore. It was an hour-long recording of a father saying goodbye to his 3 sons. I wonder how that tape even got donated in the first place. Like, was it an accident? Did the son it was given to die as well? And then whoever was donating didn't know what it was? Or did he never actually commit died and over the years he forgot about it, leaving it to get mixed in with his other stuff that eventually got donated? Story 8. About 10 years ago, I worked at a chain thrift store. One morning, we got a phone call from this gentleman saying, rather calmly, "I think I accidentally donated my mom." Naturally, I had no clue what the duck that meant. Turns out the guy donated his mom's ashes, so he left his number in case we found it. The whole back room went on a hunt because it had turned into this competition on who would find his mom first. We found her, phoned him, and he came and picked her up. We thought that was the last of him until we were processing some donations a few months later and found his mom again. We phoned him because we still had his contact information. His only reply was, "God damn it." He came and got her, and we never heard from him after that. Edit. To those asking, she was in a big, heavy bronze. There's no way that's not an urn. I'm still not convinced the second time was an accident. Story 9. I work at a thrift store as a donation handler. Gnarliest thing I'd seen was a literal stack of mattresses left overnight during off hours. They were disgusting, crawling with bugs and riddled in stains of various shades and hues. Nope the duck out of that. Called my manager, and they brought a forklift out to take them to the trash compactor. Just the other day, we had a donor drop off a small crate, like a milk crate kind of thing, chock full of hentai. Just today, I found a small marble one-hitter pipe at the bottom of the donation bin. Story 10. I was working off some probation at the Salvation Army. Going through the boxes, I found $1,000 in the pocket of some plaid pants. Found out they were dropped off from a girl whose dad had died. Tried to contact her again, but to no avail. I got to keep it, and it helped pay my rent for the month. I was really struggling at that time, so I was very grateful. Story 11. Back in the 90s, my mom would buy those blank VHS tapes to record on, and sometimes the Goodwill had some that already had stuff recorded on them, but we would just record over them. I remember one that had a bunch of Simpsons episodes, but on some of them there was adult film, a lot of adult film. Story 12. A few years ago, when there was an earthquake in Mexico City, many people were donating old clothes and stuff for people who were now homeless. I found a pair of pants that were as tall as me, and each leg could fit me inside of it. Edit. I don't live anywhere near Mexico City, but I was helping with the donation. I would have included a picture, but sadly, Gimme decided those were not important, and I think I deleted them a few months ago. Here are some other things I found. A literal goddamn baby-sized suit, a single glove the size of my head, a shirt made of what seemed to be the same fabric that my couch has. I'm not talking about just the same pattern, it was the literal fabric. A single boot that weighed about 2 pounds, and a pair of red overalls that were around the same size as the pants, although they were not as big. Story 13. Goodwill, there was this castle set I was given as a Christmas present when I was 5 that was brought in. The cannon turret actually shot the little plastic rock, and all the figures looked like dwarves. I never knew anyone else ever bought one in my life, so it was nice seeing it again. Story 14. I found a hidden WW1 photo. Gotten a crappy picture showing the different knots. It was a seaside town I was working in at the time, so I put the picture out cheap. A few days later, it fell off the wall, and the frame broke, so I brought it to the back to chuck it out. Found a big military group photo hidden behind. No idea why it was hidden. Story 15. Not me, but my aunt. One of the few surviving Enigma machine. The owner passed away, and his family dropped it off with a box of newspapers and some memorabilia from the war, etc. My aunt, being a history nut, figured out what it was, got it appraised, worth almost $100K, and looked for the family for 5 months before being able to return it to them. She didn't have a heart to take it under false pretenses. Story 16 worked at a value village a long time ago, and a coworker found cremated ashes. They were in a box that had the funeral home info on it, so our manager contacted them about it. Story 17. I worked for a Goodwill program that hired developmentally disabled adults. My job was to assist the clients as they processed donations. We found things like a bowl and bag of weed in a coat pocket, a shirt that said, "I'm not an alcoholic, I just go to AA to get chicks." Somehow that one sustained a tear and had to be trashed. And worst of all, a garbage bag full of dead rats. Story 18. Not a thrift store, but my job handled a lot of used items. Basically, the customer or next of kin would forget what was in their contents, and we would find it through cleaning. I reckon the craziest thing would be old-era Japanese rifle and katana. Unsure of the validity, of course, because research has told me fakes flooded the market. But we found it ticked away in a hidden alcove in their attic with their husband's ashes and old newspapers. So who knows? Story 19 was working in a charity shop that helped support cancer patients' treatments. Most people's donations were from the goodness of their hearts, but a very small minority would use the shop as a bin bag drop-off. Duck them people. They are scum. One time, 2 young enough dudes rock up with 2 small bags of clothes and 2 drawer-type bedroom furniture. Bag of clothes was all good, some expensive stuff at them, but each drawer had a mirror supper glued to the top of the desk. I'm standing there looking at it, like a fool, wondering what the hell is this all about. Turns out the Garda, Irish police, came in one of the days looking for the furniture and clothes. The 2 lads were dealers and they just dropped off the evidence. They were using the drawer to cut up substances. Story 20. I do not work at a Goodwill, but I found the DD 214 discharge papers of a World War II veteran at a thrift store, along with original family photos, documents, and letters. I was very upset, having recently handled so much paperwork around the death of my grandfather. I knew exactly what I was looking at when I saw the DD 214. I bought all the documents I could put my hands on and started Googling the man's name. I tracked down his adult daughter who owned a small business with her husband. I found the email address of the small business and sent her what must have been an alarming email, although I was as cordial as I possibly could be. She got back to me almost immediately. It turned out he had remarried after the marriage to her mother ended. His new wife and her 2 sons pretty much took over the man's life, and the daughter saw very little of her father. At the end of his life, they took charge of all of his possessions and cleared out his house without having told her anything. Even though the second wife had died, and the 2 sons were not technically blood, she was very angered and upset by this at the time. Understandably, I told her she must be the little girl in the baby pictures I'd found, and I would be glad to send her all these materials. I shipped them out to her via FedEx with tracking, and she was so deeply moved. She didn't have any baby pictures with her father. I don't know if I've ever done anything good in my life. I'm sure I have, but I know I did a good thing that week. Internet research skills plus compassion for the win. Story 21. Sex toy. My 72-year-old boss found it and came up to me and some coworkers through the entire store, not concealing it, to ask us what it was because she didn't know how to categorize or price it. Story 22. Not me, but my friend worked at Goodwill and he had to clean a dressing room up after a guy went in there with a bunch of ladies' underwear. The guy had smeared crap all over the walls. Story 23. Vintage Mickey Mouse gas mask from the Second World War. We were not far from an antiques dealer, and I later saw that mask in Pride of Place, center of the antique shop window. Story 24. I worked at a central facility that sorted from hundreds of donation boxes, so I got to see a lot through the years. Ill list, a select few. First day, I found a Bakelite sex toy and an old brown leather belt with 50 Ice style switch. We got a suite of leather armor. Pretty awesome. A whole roadkill deer. Keep it classy. Throw your roadkill in the donation boxes. A Soviet general cap full with badges. A week later, the same cap but with all the badges cut and picked off. Were probably worth more than the cap. A coat with about $5,000 stuffed in all the pockets. One of the employees, when I started, had secretly behind one of the sorting machines set up a sex wall of all the gimp cloths, whips, straps, and handcuffs he had found. A full uniform from one of the maximum security prisons nearby, complete with ID cards, swipe cards, and cuffs. People have no judgment. I can go on. Just got some chores to do. Here are some extras. Gross. Pocket pussy shaped like a thermos. Not cleaned cool. 1910 military motorbike gloves that were hauled horse riding gloves, half motorbike gloves. Someone donated theater private nude Polaroids in an album. It dropped out of the sorting machine while Io was mentoring a half a dozen work experience girls. So picking up nudie pictures all off the floor was awkward. Additional, we once got about 100 fur coats. It was some kind of fur specialist clothier that decided to pension and just came as the story was told with his sons in Beamers and started unloading them at the facility. Didn't see that last part, but the coats were blocking half the storage for ages. They took so much space, however, you stored them, and I still wonder how many thrift store patrons buy fur coats. Edited the amount, trying to recall how many they were. It's a few years ago now. Story 25. Oh, I got this one. I worked in fundraising for a nonprofit that used to run a thrift store. Despite the fact that the store had been closed for years when I came on staff, people still regularly dumped crap outside our door on weekends. And there was an entire terrifying garage of leftover merchandise. I spent 5 years, yes, years, slowly sorting through and figuring out how to get rid of. My donation wall of shame included 1. An open box of female condoms, 2 missing, 1 opened. 2. An artificial lower leg that someone's dog had gotten a hold of and chewed most of the foot off. 3. A mattress that someone had either given birth on or something horrible had happened to them. A weekend dump job. We called the cops JIC. 4. Numerous bags of donated clothing where the top few layers were great and the rest were dirty, stinky, ragged, permanently stained, or otherwise unusable. 5. 500, plastic Kleenex box holders that a big box home store that shares initials with the Better Business Bureau had given as part of a bulk donation deal. People are gross. Story 26. My cousin worked in a thrift store, and this redneck Karen dumped her house trash in the drop-off. This included discarded tampons, dirty diapers, clothes covered in baby crap, old panties with stains and rotten food. They called the police, and get this, the store had to accept because they can't legally return donations and had to forcefully not just accept it, but write her a tax receipt. This lady was told by the cops, though it's not cool to do that. She got mad, and so for months, she would pile trash into her Toyota, added a few kids' toys in, and drive in the dead of night to the thrift shop drop-off. Finally, they filed an illegal dumping case on her and charged her with harassment and a fraud charge. Story 27. I worked for a charity shop for a year during my time at university. Once we got a huge donation of clothes in the middle of the night. Like someone just dropped a massive pile of clothing in front of the entry and ducked off. That's not cool, and usually people do it because they want to get rid of trash cheaply. But damn, this time there were a pair of Gucci men's shoes in there. We all didn't know how to tell if they were fake or real and went to ask a neighbor shoe shop, and they were real. And not only real, also very old and in great condition. We sold them on an auction for a lot of money. Story 28. Every once in a while at the shop I used to volunteer at, a large white bag would appear. Always the same kind of white bag. It was full of hand-knitted baby cardigans, hats, gloves, booties. All different shades, expertly made, beautifully folded, with tissue paper on top, and the whole thing smelled of fresh baby powder. Nobody ever saw who brought it in. We'd be through the back sorting stuff, head through when we heard the front door go, and one white bag would be there with nobody in sight. I've not worked there for years, but it still happens from what I'm told. To this day, nobody knows who the mystery knitter is. Story 29. I worked at a Goodwill when I was in high school, nearly 20 years ago, and there was a list of things we were not allowed to accept that make sense, but you might not realize, such as kitchen knives, secret displays, monitors, and TVs, anything with fluorescent lights, mattresses, and some other things I can't remember. When we got one of those things but didn't notice in time to turn it away, we didn't really have a set policy on what to do with it. Mostly, we'd put them in our dumpster, but sometimes I'd set it aside behind the building and put it in my car after work. It's how I'm the owner of a full-sized sword I still don't know what to do with. The other thing that came in that was weird, but not because the thing itself was weird. If you've donated anything to a Goodwill, you know that they have a kind of drive-through donation area, where you pull into a small pass-through garage with open doors on both sides. Then you and/or an employee take your stuff out of your trunk or whatever, then you drive away. One day, a guy pulls up in a rusted-out red Trans Am, or it has become a Trans Am in my memory, screeches to a halt, reaches over to his passenger seat, grabs a plastic bag completely full of something, and holds it out through the driver's side window. I walk toward the car, and just as I was about to grab the bag, he looks me straight in the eyes and says, "This is for you," like I was Frodo, and this was the One Ring. He drops the bag and I barely catch it as he speeds away without saying another word. So, what was in the bag? It was entirely cassette tapes. The Cure's first single, The Velvet Underground's underrated self-titled album, a Tom Pretty B-side collection, 2 records by the Sugar Cubes, The Pretenders, and more. I had just gotten into Talking Heads and David Bowie. My music taste was evolving, but it was still mostly 90s grunge. I'd never heard of the Velvet Underground. So, like with the sword, I set it aside and took it home myself. It was for me, he said. My car still had a cassette deck, so I started listening to this curated collection of one person's music taste. It was like that cliche of your older brother introducing their music to you, except I have no idea who this person was. It ended up being exactly what I needed at exactly the right time in my life. I still have that Velvet Underground album displayed on the wall in my home office. Story 30. This is a story from my friend from like a year ago. I don't specifically remember where they worked, but it was a thrift store. Someone trying donating an urn, pretty okay, I guess. But the urn had ashes in it. Why would you donate your ashes? To a thrift store? Story 31. One time, I ordered a smartwatch that was about $300 on Amazon. It was supposed to have a specific feature according to the description in the manual, which it ended up not having. For some bizarre reason, when it came to returning it, Amazon just told me to keep it and refunded my money. So I decided to donate it to Goodwill so I could have the tax write-off. My state has a refundable tax credit for donating to a charity that serves the working poor because I knew that was worth more than trying to sell it. I walked in and told the employee I had a smartwatch I wanted to donate and get a receipt for it. She dismissively told me to throw it in the donation bin and just stood there. I told her I really thought she should take possession of it personally, and she just waved me off. I finally asked her if she really wanted me to throw a brand new $300 watch in a box anyone walking by could snatch, and proceeded to show her the receipt and watch. Needless to say, she changed her tune real quick and walked me over to the counter to get me a receipt and take possession of the watch. I got the feeling they don't get donations of brand new expensive electronics very often. Story 32. I used to work for a thrift store in a rural area during college. All proceeds went to the local human society. It was a fun job, and every day was like a treasure hunt looking through donations. The real interesting part was when we'd get the call to go clear out a house after an estate sale. Basically, when someone dies, their home is a museum filled with everything they owned. The family comes through first to claim any heirlooms and argue over valuables. Then, a company would be hired to liquidate any remaining assets, so they usually hold an estate sale, and the public would come in and pick over most of the remaining items. After that, pretty much everything that didn't sell was donated to us. They'd call it the leftovers. So we'd show up with a truck and we'd clear it out and take everything to our shop for sorting. Then the house would sell and some young couple would buy the house. They would update the kitchen, have kids, collect stuff, get old, and then die. The cycle would repeat. It was good job security. Most of what we got was basic household items and random knickknacks. Plates, bowls, a collection of little glass unicorns, a worn-out desk. Nothing anyone really wanted. And the books. The books were always there. Walls of books. Untouched for decades and overlooked by all. This was my favorite part. I would always take time with the books to see what a person had read throughout their life. I found it fascinating to try to get a sense of kind of story they'd wanted their life to be based on the books they had read. You could tell their favorites because the spines we worn increased. I remember one house had a massive wall of books. It was beautiful. Upon closer inspection, I found that nearly all of the books, hundreds at least, some sort of self-help book. How to Make People Like You, The Millionaire Mindset. Almost the entire anthology of For Dummies. It was sad and awesome at the same time. I wondered if they had ever become who they wanted to be. But the books weren't just interesting for the novelty of trying to learn about this dead person who'd left them behind. They also held a secret treasure. Within the pages of those forgotten books was very often hidden, perfectly preserved, crisp, $100 bills. You see, people who'd survived the Great Depression or World War II had a penchant for saving for a rainy day, and they didn't trust banks. So very often when they'd happen upon a windfall, they would squirrel away a few $100s in their favorite book. The book would go on a shelf to be forgotten and overlooked by everyone. That is until I arrived to clean up after a lifetime of consumerism. Once everything was loaded into the truck, brought back to the shop, sorted, sold, or taken to the dump because it would never sell, we'd probably net out about $1,000 from a whole house of leftovers. The books were the real moneymaker. In most cases, I'd find between $200 out of $500 hidden between the pages of those dusty books. One time we found over $3,000. The cash from those books, and in some cases the books themselves, were by far the best source of revenue we had. And the dogs and cats at the Humane Society were grateful for them. Story 33. I'm a books and media donation sorter. Sometimes donations tell sad stories. Half a bottle of gin tucked away in a box of books. In such a way that if you knew it was there, you could get it easily, but if you didn't know it was there, it would just look like a box of old books. A stack of Saxon algebra textbooks, along with To Train Up a Child and Dare to Discipline. A bunch of books about dealing with divorce, mixed with essential oil melon materials. A board book about trains, a few Goosebumps titles, and the Communist Manifesto. That one wasn't sad, it was just weird. A rolling suitcase full of Consumer Reports magazine. That one was just demoralizing. I work in a small independent store, and we don't have mixed paper recycling, so I had to throw them all in the regular trash when the donor could have recycled them. A book of Grateful Dead sheet music that absolutely reeked of marijuana. One thing that comes in a lot is used copies of the diary of a wimpy kid do-it-yourself book, which is like a journal with places to write and draw. It's always fun to read the favorites lists. The craziest thing ever donated to our store was probably half a dozen urns of dog ashes. A dog breeder died and left us all her stuff. Story 34. I don't work at one, but I do know that my grandma donated a bunch of old suits my great-grandfather wore to the Salvation Army. Turns out when she told my great-grandma what she did when she met back up with her again, she explained to her how she sewed up a bunch of cash in the lining of the jackets and pants. She was a paranoid old woman that had luck for miles, though. She was always winning money on bingo and other raffles. Wild how that stuff can be right under your nose and you don't notice it. Story 35. Literally the first day on the job at a Salvation Army I came across. Several cardboard boxes filled with glassware, all of which were soaked with cat piss. A bag full of urine-soaked clothing from a different person. A pair of women's yoga pants stained with, I assume, period blood. Several bags of actual trash. This is actually quite common, since people assume poor folks will take anything, and it's cheaper than going to the dump. A voodoo doll with pins in it. I assume it was some sort of tourist souvenir, but still creepy as crap. A crate of super rare VHS tapes, including a VHS copy of Aragon. Granted, my first day was a bit of a special occurrence. Besides the disgusting clothing, though, it was actually a super sick job. Unless it was super valuable. You could take anything you want that came in before it went out front. The coolest thing that ever came in was an assortment of Norwegian vinyl greeting cards, essentially an archaic version of the modern ones that play sound when you open them. Another time we got an Aussie jacket and gator boots. I live in Western Canada, so the odds of coming across these are virtually zero, but probably the rarest item was a 1980 Nakamichi Dragon cassette deck, which was in terrible condition and didn't work, unfortunately. Story 36. I work at a thrift store in the Netherlands. Usually I sort books. When fun things come in, the guys usually show me. So like 2 years ago, a red case came in through the garbage dump. We've got an agreement with them. Nice things are put aside for us to pick up and sell. If their employees want anything, they put a note on it and can pick it up for a small amount of money. Anyway, the red case. It contained all adult toys for an SM session. All was properly cleaned. My boss thought it was gross and tossed it in the garbage. My boyfriend, who also works there, and a coworker took it out of the trash and hid it, just to wait for our boss to forget it. Half a year passes. The case is still hidden, and it's finally time to have some fun. We head to the store after hours. Beef is manager and has a key. And we start out decorating the office, drag in a doll from the clothes department, and give it a strap-on. Butt plugs in the register, things like that. Everything accompanied by little notes, suggesting really naughty things. Our boss came to work the next morning, and he found it really funny. Cleaned everything up before customers came in and tossed it in the trash again. Last week, boss and BFE, they were cleaning up in the back. Guess what they found? Edit. OMG, thank you kind stranger for my very first award. Edit 2. Thank you for the second award. Second kind stranger, story 37. My story is not a Goodwill thrift store, but I volunteered to help a friend of a friend clean out her parents' place after both of them had passed away. Mom was a serious pack rat. Payment was I could keep what I wanted. Interesting found items consisted of canned fruit that expired in '87, placed on the floor of the garage the day they moved in, never touched again. Complete first edition Oz books. First Barbie still in the original box. Maps of us from the early 1800s. Prototype Star Wars poster from 1977. Dad was a coin collector, so I was constantly finding Morgan silver dollars on the floor. Bag of fabric from 1973. Never used with the receipt still in the bag. Kept this and had some amazing pillows made. Halloween decorations from the 20s and 30s. This was huge for me because I used to collect vintage Halloween stuff. So when I came across 2 unused postcards from 1911 by Ellen Clapsaddle, I kept them and I still have them. Each of them go for about $300. The coolest item found were a pair of original postcards. One for the RMS Olympic and the other for her sister ship RMS Titanic. Story 38. I worked at Goodwill on and off for 4 years and saw sex toys, dirty underwear, a box of crickets, a snake, a bag of dog poop that had to sit in our compactor for a whole week, a social security card, a used syringe and a purse. One time a lady walked in with 2 mice on her shoulder, went to the bathroom, came out without them, and left the store. Story 39. In one day I found a bubbler, empty bottles of alcohol, a full bottle of tequila, empty cigarette packs, and bags of pills. Whoever donated all this crap also donated their backpack, which had their nursing ID in it. Story 40. I worked for a youth program, ages 13 to 18, that did not accept donations as we were government funded, but that didn't stop people from leaving garbage bags full of children toys and baby clothes for some reason. And despite the sign stating, "We do not accept donations," they would leave them out in all weather, and suddenly we were stuck with them. so we would rebag them as the bags got covered in cat piss and get torn up. We would often get crap-stained baby clothes, toys that were for some reason half melted, and random expired food. Pissed me off every time I rolled in and saw a bunch of garbage bags at the door. Also, went to Value Village one day and played my usual game of find the weirdest shirt and most obscure band shirt. I found a shirt that said in bold white letters, "I'll buy you a drink when you learn to swallow without gagging and take it in the ass without crying." I was baffled that, 1, someone saw this shirt and bought it, either for themselves or for a loved one. 2, someone eventually thought it was appropriate enough to donate to a thrift store. 3, someone at the thrift store saw it and thought it was appropriate enough to price it and put it on the shelf. Needless to say, I wear that shirt constantly now. JK, that shirt did not leave the store with me. Story 41. The strangest thing I ever found was actually a bag of uncut emeralds. Most of them were petty small, had inclusions or clarity issues, but still it was a bag of uncut, unprocessed emeralds. Story 42. My time to shine. I worked in the e-commerce department for a huge district of Goodwills, and that crap was wild. We had a room dedicated to items deemed inappropriate or illegal to resell that had a wall floor to ceiling stacked with copies of Mein Kampf, which was more a spectacle than anything. A ton of super illegal taxidermy, sea turtles, elephant foot, leopard pelt. Even museums couldn't accept the sea turtles as donations for any sort of display purposes. Story 43. Not me, but a friend used to work at a Goodwill while attending college. She apparently came across guns more than a couple times. I'm not really sure the procedure on how they took care of that, but I remember her telling me one did apparently end up being connected to a crime. Story 44. I'm a thrift shop junkie, and all the people that work at my local ones know me and know that I know what most stuff is worth. I went into a St. Vincent de Paul store, and the manager knew me and called me into the office. There was a large box, not a little jewelry box, like a tackle box, size box, and she opened it, and it was full of antique jewelry. Right off the bat, I saw a couple of emeralds and some sapphires. She said someone left it, and the key was taped to the top of the box. I don't know jewelry, but recommended someone I know who's an expert to come look at it. It was worth a fortune. All I can guess is someone's grandma passed, and they didn't even look in it. They just dropped it off. Story 45. I've worked at a Salvation Army for the past 3 months as a donation attendant. These are the highlights. A bag of literally every single sex toy you could think of. Sex toy. Used lingerie, although this one is fairly common, so it doesn't really faze me. A coffee maker with coffee still in it. A box of like maybe 200 CDs, except it was only the case and the CDs were gone. Full cans of beer as part of our non-perishable food donation. Someone once tried to give me like a mouse in a cage. They said they caught it in their house. Duckman, I'm so close to quitting Lumpheo. Story 46. Worked at a Goodwill as a materials handler. One day a man with his very pregnant wife roll up to the donation center. There's a nice desk being donated as well as a nice bookshelf. And then a small, white, rectangular cardboard box. I had just been at Planned Parenthood a week earlier with my high school girlfriend when she had been given an identical small, white, rectangular cardboard box. It was a Nuva ring, a form of contraception where a woman inserts some kind of baby-preventing ring inside her pussy. That was missing only one of the 3 Nuva rings that came in the introductory package. Suddenly, the desk and bookshelf made sense. He was making room for a nursery out of his old study. Also, the very pregnant wife made sense. That being said, I yeeted that crap into the trash compactor immediately. We're not doctors. We can't prescribe you with an appropriate form of BC. Story 47. Whiskey figurines. Many of them were full, but some were not. Of course, we had to dispose of them because alcohol is flammable and Goodwill does not have a liquor license. Story 48. Not a worker, but I found a cool painting in a thrift shop once for $20. On the back of it was a list of all the galleries it had been to. Mostly Dubai and Middle Eastern countries, as well as some other information I can't remember. Looked up the artist when I got home, and his painting sold for $5,000. $20,000. Story 49. I volunteered at a Goodwill for community service. It wasn't all that exciting, but I learned that 90% of donations don't make it on the racks, which is what makes this story even more wacky to me. One time, years before, I found an awesome shirt at a local thrift shop and bought it, and it was awesome. I was wearing it, and my not-yet first husband told me that he thought I got rid of that shirt. He remembered because it was such an odd color, like green polyester. I told him, heck no, I just bought this. He couldn't believe it, but he thought I had rebought a shirt that I already owned and then had donated. We donated through an organization called Disabled Vets. I think that this was 20 plus years ago, where they pick up your stuff with a truck. They call a week or so ahead of time when they are in your area. I must have put the shirt in a bag, or he did. Disabled Vets came, and then they sell their acquired donations by the pound to local thrift shops. The donations are then sorted, many disposed of, some sent overseas or elsewhere, and a small fraction placed on the racks. Well, this shirt must have made it through all that. Ended up at a nearby thrift store, survived to get on the rack, and then I bought it again. My husband even found a picture of me wearing it prior, because I wasn't sure I believed him. Story 50, sex toy, used dirty underwear, an envelope with 5K, basically anything. People forget crap in boxes and drawers all the time and just dump it in a bag. My BF works for a thrift store warehouse, so he sees everything before it's distributed to the individual thrift stores. Most of the time, items like that are thrown out, but sometimes they'll throw it in an outgoing bin just for the laughs. So if you work at a thrift store and you find something particularly gross or funny, just know a warehouse full of guys have already laughed at it and made jokes about how the person who finds it will react. Sadly, though, most new things or old things you find are from people's estates. Even more sad is with this opiate epidemic happening the last 5+ years. He's seen so much more new stuff being dropped off that belonged to obviously younger people. Brought us home an Xbox One with a year worth of Xbox Premium last year. We think it's made our house haunted at it. I told him about this post and my comment, and he told me last week one of his buddies found something called a Tenga, and it wasn't clean. Google, if you must. Story 51. Worked as a donation attendant at Goodwill for 6 years. We get a lot of dead people's clothes and other dead people's items, but clothes creeped me out the most. And the donors often made it clear when that was the case. One time a woman, mid-50s, was donating a ton of her recently deceased mother's clothes. Once I brought all of her bags in, she said, "I just want to make sure with you that none of these clothes are going to end up overseas. I've heard you have a program where some unsold or unsellable clothes end up going to people in need overseas, and I just need to make sure that that doesn't happen with any of this stuff because my mom wouldn't have been okay with that." I grabbed a manager, and I didn't hear what he said specifically, but TBH, he probably lied to her because she still donated it all. Honorable mention, very dirty dishes, like obviously not washed after they were last used, which sometimes looked like it must have been years ago. Story 52. Oh man, my time has come. I've worked exclusively in thrift for nearly 8 years, my entire legal working life. On one occasion, someone donated a plastic cup that was still about halfway filled with iced tea. Someone donated a live fawn, box of live snakes, sex toy, handgun, live grenade, and finally, the worst, someone donated their child. Story 53. Used to work for a homelessness charity shop. We regularly encountered biohazards of various kinds stored inside bags of clothes, which was irritating. Donations of funeral urns were pretty regular and kind of weird emo. Story 54. Lots of gross and sad stuff. A lot of memories pale next to the stark memories I have of a number of semi-senile 70-plus-year-old ladies who would come in and try on secondhand lingerie and come out of the dressing rooms to ask opinions from anyone else in the shop. The most unique thing that sticks with me is an odd incoming trickle of rawhide art. Story 55. I worked at one in an average neighborhood of a large Australian city. While the neighborhood may have been average, the quality of our donations were among the best of the best. I mean, we would have a designer outfit from a world-known designer like Armani nearly every month at least. Our rejects were the quality that you would normally find for sale in most thrift stores. We were that blessed with quality donation. I have seen uniforms for various businesses, a mounted stuffed dog, a folder with a heap of basketball trading cards. I checked, nothing rare or valuable, but the craziest would have to be an overnight carry bag. Open it up, a complete Commodore 64 and 128, with literally 30 or 40 games on disc and/or cartridge. Perfect working order, virtually no marks or scratches. Story 56. This isn't crazy, but will tell you a lot about how negligent people can be. Someone donated a big box of Legos. Now that's fine. Unless they were sets, we would just stick them in freezer bags. But we had a lot of intake that day, and the box was pushed to the back. About a week later, we're getting flies and noticing a stench. I start tracking the stench and decide to open the box. The guy had left a package of chicken thighs in there. Still sealed, mind you, but looking very green. Needless to say, we dumped the Legos. Story 57. My older cousin's story, not mine. She was going through bags of donations, and one of the bags was full of sex toys. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part was the fact that they were dirty AF and had clearly not been cleaned after that. And a few other instances, they had to change the rules, things that you could donate. Story 58. A relative worked in a second-hand store. Once, 2 years ago, the employees that were receiving the donations approached me and gave me a Game Boy Color that looked like brand new and told me they didn't have the cables to make it work, so they weren't selling it. I didn't say anything and got the Game Boy. I'm glad they didn't notice it had batteries. Hey, Story 59. I spent about 3 years working at Goodwill. taking donations, sorting, and pricing them. I found in no particular order a live bat hiding inside an umbrella, more $100+ purses or shoes than I can remember, a trash bag filled with literally only knives and broken glass, lots of mice, about $300 in a purse that helped to pay for my car. Customer found about $2,000 in a mason jar on the shelf and turned it in. Belonged to an elderly person who picked it up later. Woman left her needle and her fix kit in a dressing room. Came back after closing to try and retrieve it. I have a lot of Goodwill stories that I've never posted because I never see the right question. Always waiting for that one. Story 60. My grandpa told me about how his brother used to sew his savings into his coat. I guess he didn't trust the banks, which he wore all the time. Anyway, one day he was in the street wearing his coat, and he drops dead. When my grandpa went to see him at the hospital, his jacket was not with the body and they never found it. Fast forward a few months and my grandpa reads in the newspaper how a jacket was found in a thrift store with a small fortune sewed in the inner linings of the coat. He never chased it, but he knew that was his brother's. Story 61. Bedbugs are donated all the time. $750 in the pocket of a brand new coat. Sex toy, substances. Period panties, bearskin rug, nudes from the 1970s. Books. Someone straight up took a crap in the donation box once. All just your average item. Story 62. A fake stuffed rhino head. Imagine a plush toy rhino the size of an actual rhino. That's all it was. Bought it myself and had it hanging on the wall for 15 years. Story 60. Used to work in a charity bookshop. They'd get so many donations that there were just piles of books everywhere, waiting to be sorted. Some from years and years ago. I was digging through them and found an old wildlife book with old-fashioned color plate prints of birds. Looked it up and it was worth $600 or more. Or just sat there under the sorting table, propping up other books. I could have given them $20 and taken it, but my conscience got the better of me. Damn conscience. Story 64. There's Children's Hospital thrift store in my hometown. When I was 17, was into watches for some reason. Went in to see if I can find an old vintage watch that I liked. I saw an old 90s Rolex Explorer with a suspicious price tag for $350. A bit above my price range, but I asked the employee about it. He had said, "It was dropped in our donation bin out back. We're not sure if it's real or not." I didn't buy it in fear that I'm not going to blow $350 on a fake watch. Big damn reveal. I go in a week later and they had it priced at $7K. One of the employees brought it to a jewelry store to be authenticated. Missed out on the biggest steal of my life. Story 65. I work at a value village, Savers in the US, and there's far, far too much underwear donated. And there's an uncomfortable amount of items in the intimate apparel section, and these get bought far too much. Story 66. I don't work at one, but I found a brand new Nintendo Switch at the local Savers, priced at $25. At first, I thought it was just the box when I saw it, but I cracked it open and it was a completely new Switch. I picked it up, walked to the oldest cashier I could find, and bought it. I'm sure some of you will call bullcrap, but it's 1000% true. I've always wondered how it got there and why. I've also always felt a little bad, but I don't think it's my fault that they mispriced it. Story 67. The nose propeller thing from a Cessna aircraft. How or why it ended up there, I don't know, but it was cool to see. An envelope filled with unknown white powder scared the heck out of me, but no one took my concerns seriously, and I never got sick, so that's that. And of course, the obligatory bags of dirty socks and underwear, knives in random places, loads of sex toy, a few guns and bullets, and enough syringes to fill a small doctor's office. The strangest was a syringe stuck into a fake houseplant. Story 68. An urn containing their Auntie Agnes's ashes. Luckily, it still had the Undertaker's card tucked in the box, so we tracked the family down and sent her home. Story 69. It's not one crazy item exactly, but it's crazy what people think it's okay to donate. My least favorite is crotch stains. So many crotch stains. Period blood. The most common, like really common. Piss and crap also made appearances. General sweat stains in the crotch are also common. Sometimes other residue. Stains could be on work pants, jeans, leggings, tights, sexy lingerie, not sexy lingerie, swimwear, dresses. People also leave used tissues in pockets. Sometimes we would open a bag and the stench was overwhelming. It seemed like people saw us as a general disposal service. Or maybe they think poorer people don't care. Story 70. My ex once worked at one and had the unfortunate luck of discovering an entire armoire full of adult toys, some of which still had working batteries. Story 71. I don't work at one, but I was dropping some stuff off there as employees were bringing things in. I asked them this exact question. They said that people are using the Salvation Army drop-off as their garbage drop-off. They said about 25-foot donations are bags of garbage and broken products that curbside garbage pickup won't take. It's sad. They also said they find a lot of sex toys being donated in the same bags with kids' toys. Story 72. Worked in a truck collecting these bins. Chicago Bulls starter jacket. Dope. Oh, you don't even know. Still in the plastic. Yes, I stole it. Don't you ducking judge me. It was mean. Story 73. Here we go. A duffel bag full of bone. Large one. We had to call the police, who brought the bones to a coroner to determine if they were human. They ended up not being human. But still, why? Why do you have a duffel bag full of bones to begin with? And why the hell do you think your local thrift store wants them? Story 74. I managed a small thrift shop for a while and didn't come across anything too weird. But I've also shopped at a lot of thrift shops and have accidentally found some weird crap. I bought a jacket and later found a human molar in the pocket. I bought a different jacket and later found a little plastic cake figurine in a hidden pocket. I bought a jar of vintage buttons for $0.25 and found a 1940s Superman ring that I sold on eBay for $1,800. If it had been in better condition, it could have sold for several thousand. Story 75. I currently work in a thrift store in Australia. Only about a month ago, an older lady made a donation. A bag of clothes. Nothing weird there. Then I got to the bottom of the bag and there was a plastic bag, and I opened it to find sex gear. We don't sell that sort of stuff for obvious reasons. It got thrown out. Story 76. My ex-wife's mom worked at Value Village for a decade. The one that sticks out to me was the live grenade they found. Had to call in the bomb squad to get it. Her coworkers tossed it to each other like a baseball. She nearly had a stroke before they got yelled at. Also, lots of used needles, dead small animals. Story 77. 15 years ago, when I just graduated high school, I was working in a crafty local music shop. Someone consigned a Gibson USA R9 Les Paul for $800. I bought it and promptly flipped it on eBay for 5,800 smackaroos. Story 78. Haven't worked at one, but once found a snow globe Christmas themed from Orchard Hardware Supply still in a box, and the shipping label was still on it, and it was from Orchard. I looked it up and it had been sent to a builder, probably as a thank you for your business kind of things. I bought it for all and resent it to him with handwritten note that said, "You get one more chance, you better not give this away again." I still wonder what his reaction was. What is the best treasure you've ever found at a thrift store, garage sale, flea market? At a small thrift store, I found a floor-length black velvet, real velvet, not velveteen, vintage Oscar de la Renta gown in perfect condition, and miraculously in my size for $10. And as if that wasn't enough, a few minutes later, found a brand new pair of Yves Saint Laurent black satin pumps with original tags, $400, for a measly $2. I wasn't a designer glam gal and had no reason to own these, as I had no need for them. I socialized in a much lower tax bracket. 2 weeks later, I was hired at a job that required me to host a celebrity-packed fundraising gala where these thrift store finds served me very well. Edit to add, wow. Thank you all so much for all this love. I wish I still had the pics from that grand night and that I still lived near that store. Mostly, I wish I could tell you all that happened at the gala. It was some night. Story 2. My family went to the county fair and my youngest son took along his favorite little toy, a stuffed duck with feet, where he put his fingers and walked along on things, making happy quacking noises. As is tradition, toys brought on outings get lost. He was sad, but at least it wasn't his favorite lovey, a stuffed sea otter. A year later, we stopped at a thrift store to look for school clothes, and he found the same toy hanging up. So of course it came home with us. Opening the baggie, he found his initials on the tag on the toy, where I had put them a couple of years ago. It was the same toy. Story 3. I found a painting at a garage sale I thought was beautiful, but no idea of what it was, but it just struck me. Paid $15, and it came in a gorgeous frame. Got it home and did some research through art people in our area. Found out it's worth almost $4K. Great score. Story 4. A brand new high-quality suede coat for $20. What made it a real treasure is that it's somehow my dream jacket. The one I've designed 100 times in my head and thought I'd never have, because leather goods are so expensive. It's the exact shade, weight, and shape that I pictured 1,000 times, but it's also a design that isn't common for leather jackets. I always figured to get one cut like that fit me so well, I'd probably have to order it custom. I dreamed of that jacket long enough that I even knew it would cost me about $600 to have one made. But then one day I was picking up some work pants at the thrift store, and it was right there. I wasn't even looking at the coats, but someone had pulled it out and DD'd it over the rack. Not 2 months prior, my car had been stolen with both my jackets inside, so I didn't have a coat at all, and wasn't sure how I'd be able to afford to buy one when it got cold again. I have worn that coat every day, from September to May ever since. It's one of my most prized possessions. Story 5. My greatest regret in life is not buying the taxidermy frogs playing basketball with one doing a slam dunk. I regret not buying it nearly every time I go to the thrift shop, hoping I'll see it again. Truly heartbreaking. Story 6. Several years ago, I was walking around the neighborhood late Saturday afternoon. It was garage sale weekend, but I didn't look too closely at the sales because I was broke. I was just walking to get some exercise, clear my head, maybe cheer myself up. When I was just a few blocks from returning home, I found a $20 bill on the sidewalk. I looked around, but there was nobody. It wasn't even in front of a home with a sale going on. Now I was cheered up, and I stopped in at the last garage sale with my $20. It was an older couple, and they were already moving things inside, closing up shop. I browsed around and just asked, "You wouldn't have any vinyl records for sale, would you?" They looked at one another, shrugged, and led me into the house. Upstairs, in what was clearly their son's old bedroom, they pulled a box of records out of the closet. I got the distinct feeling he had died. I didn't ask, but his room looked like a shrine to the late 1980s. I paid $20 for the whole box and carried it home. That thing was an absolute gold mine of punk albums, including an original pressing of The Germs' GI signed by Pat Smear, an original of Operation Ivy's Energy, Green Day's 39 Smooth and Kerplunk, plus a few other Lookout Records releases, and more. I sold the GI album alone for $600, and I regret it. Story 7. I paid $1 for a box of books. One was A Child's History of the Confederacy by D.H. Hill. I graduated from NC State, and our library was the D.H. Hill Library. I took the book to the library the next time I was in Raleigh and asked if they were interested in acquiring it. The director of acquisitions asked what I wanted for it. I said I was happy to donate it. Just send me a contribution receipt. A few weeks later, I got a nice letter thanking me for my contribution of $1,000. Story 8. I was a broke single mom trying to furnish my first apartment. I went to a garage sale and saw an almost brand new recliner. I was admiring it, knowing I couldn't afford it, just doing a little daydreaming. The woman holding the sale came over and asked if I liked it. I told her of course I loved it, but as I was a broke single mom, that wasn't happening. I thanked her for the daydream and turned to go. She asked me to wait and went inside to get her adult son. She told me that she would sell it to me for $1. I knew she could make some money, so I declined as I knew that wasn't fair to her. She then told me that she was in the middle of a divorce and he got half of everything she made at the sale. I left there with a recliner, a kitchen table, and a bookshelf, and I spent $3. Was the divorce story true, or was she just helping me out? Don't know, but I've made sure to always help others once I was in a better spot. Story 9. Not a store, but I used to work for a junk removal company. Most clients were just rich people who didn't want to deal with throwing out their stuff, so it wasn't uncommon to find things of value and keep them to resell or just have. I was on an estate, clean out, and pulling stuff out of the attic and found a box that I decided to open it just to see what was inside. I popped the lid and inside there was 17 small orange, very old, boxes with big blue letters said, Lionel. Model trains, box full of money. I quietly put the box in the truck cab to investigate later. Once I got home, I pulled the trains out and started researching them. 2 full sets from the 930s, all new in box. The boxes showed their age, but the trains looked like they had never been removed from the box. Most even still had their deteriorated packing materials around them. I turned to the model train subreddit to learn more, and was immediately swamped with people trying to buy them, and one person who was wildly honest with me and told me what they thought they were worth, and not to let someone try and swindle me out of my gold mine, mentioning he wished he could afford to buy them from me. I went to a local hobby shop to learn even more, and confirmed their real monetary and historical value, about $10,000, and considered to be museum quality, near mint condition, exceedingly rare. In the end, I didn't get $10K. I contacted the Redditor who had told me what they were really worth, while everyone else was offering a few $100, and offered to sell them to him. We agreed on $2,000. He and his aging father, likely past by now, had bonded over their love of model trains since he was a kid and had a massive layout in their basement. Last I heard from him a couple years ago, the trains are still running and well taken care of. I'm glad I gave them to someone who would truly appreciate them and enjoy them as they were intended, instead of putting behind a glass case or looking at them as only an investment to make money off of Story 10. I paid $1 for a necklace at a sidewalk sale on my way to work. I thought it was an amazing steal as it looked like cherry amber bakelite. Then I got to work, vintage store, and the picker who sold us things said, "Nice necklace, I'll give you $3 for it," which I thought meant $3. Then he said, "Okay, $3.50, and I was of course surprised. Turns out it is actual cherry amber, not bakelite, and worth more like $600. Story 11. I bought an unused 6-quart KitchenAid mixer with all the attachments at a garage sale for $20. Retails for $400. I then gave it to my sister as an early birthday present. She bakes cakes and cookies for parties, has a side gig, and was hand mixing everything beforehand. She was ecstatic. Story 12. This is going to seem silly, but I still love it. So my mom and I had been at the mall, and I found this gorgeous rainbow scarf at the Gap. However, it was $50, and I wasn't willing to spend that, so I didn't buy it. Cue about 2 months later, and my mom and I were at the Goodwill. Lo and behold, there is the scarf. It's in perfect condition and was only $15.99. I, of course, bought it. I've had it 8 years now, and it's still in perfect condition, and I wear it every time it's cold. Granted, where I live, that means about 3 months a year, so maybe that's why it's still in perfect condition. Still my favorite find. Story 13, waiting for my wife while she spent her usual hour in a value village. Looked up at a top shelf, and there were several knife blocks with the usual well-abused cheap knives, but one had 2 stainless handles sticking up that I recognized. Paid $7.09 CAD for the whole shebang. Grabbed the Global GS Nakiri and GS Santoku out of the pack and dropped the rest in a donation bin on the way out to the car. Combined total of about 220 CAD in value. Story 14. I remember not wanting to go to a church flea market when I was like 5. Came back with a massive Star Wars haul. Dozens of Return of the Jedi figures. The brown hover car from New Hope. Icing on the cake was a broken Millennium Falcon that I played with daily. 6-year-old me was super happy. Story 15. Had a work colleague who had a garage sale. Her new husband added a bunch of his basement junk to the sale. A browser who was a prof at Harvard University told the husband that a framed sketch he had was done by Napoleon. He took it to the university and they authenticated it as a genuine Napoleon sketch. It was a nautical drawing done from the deck of a ship. Story 16. I had a beautiful condition first press of the Who's rock opera, Quadrophenia. It was a double album with an insert. It had been signed by the band. It was one of my most treasured possessions. It cost me $100. I was 16. The year was 1990. My girlfriend came over one day and asked if she could borrow some records so she could make a tape. I agreed, saying, please, take care of them. She took a small stack and left. I didn't know which albums she took. After a few weeks, I asked if I could have them back. She stalled. She said she left them at her friend's house. I was fuming. She assured me she'd get them back ASAP. A couple weeks later, I happened to pass a garage sale sign that said vintage clothes, camping gear, records, so I stopped in. I looked at an old Coleman camp stove, a leather jacket, and then the records. There was a copy of Trojan Dub Classics, which I already owned, Jimmy Cliff's The Harder They Come soundtrack, which I already owned, the Selector's Too Much Pressure, owned that one too, and then I saw it, The Who, Quadrophenia. Wait a goddamn minute. I opened it, and there they were, the signatures. What the duck? This was mine. And so were the Trojan Dub Classics and Too Much Pressure, and The Harder They Come, and a half dozen others in the stack. That ducking Karen. I grabbed every record that was mine, walked over and asked, where did you get these? The middle-aged gentleman in the folding lawn chair said, those are my sons. I said, bull ducking crap. These are mine. I wanted to know where he got them. He asked me to hold on, got up and walked into the house. A woman came out. She said, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. My husband and I asked our boys if there was anything they wanted to get rid of. My son put those records there. They belonged to a girl he was with. They had a falling out. He broke up with her when he found out she had a boyfriend. She came to the house yelling and screaming a few nights ago, saying she loved him and she's sorry. My husband told her to leave and never come back. I just stood there, holding my records to my chest, livid. She said, I'm assuming those records are yours and not hers. Take them and please don't come back. I got in my car and left. On the literal 3-block drive back to my house, I suddenly felt nothing. No love, no anger, no pain, just emptiness. That night, I went to her house. I brought in my usual satchel with the records inside. We smoked a joint, watched some TV. Her parents went out. We could hear the car leaving the garage. They're going to my aunt's house, she said. They won't be back for a few hours. Want a duck? I said, sure. She went to take a shower and I laid out the records on the floor. I put on Quadrophenia and held the record player needle over it until I heard her coming out of the bathroom. Then I dropped it. A quick one while he's away played. She walked in naked and stopped, looked at the floor, looked at me, looked at the floor. She turned and walked into the bathroom, shut the door. I stopped the record, collected my records, threw them in my satchel, walked out, and drove away. You aren't forgiven. Story 17. There's a thrift store near me that doesn't know what it has. They will sell you Armani, Gucci, Calvin Klein, Michael Kors for $4.99. It's all authentic. It's located in a very wealthy neighborhood, and people donate crazy expensive clothes after just wearing it once. It's crazy. My closet is jam-packed with designer clothes from there. And shoes. Story 18. 26 years ago, friends of ours gave us this beautiful handmade platter as a wedding gift. It was by far the nicest thing we owned. We were super poor, and this thing sat on our table for years as a point of pride. Then our toddler daughter was suddenly tall enough to reach it, and she pulled it down to the floor, where it shattered. Totally our fault for not realizing that this was a thing that she could now do. I was seriously bummed out over the loss of the platter, so much so that I kept all of the itty-bitty smashed up pieces. A decade or so went by, and my mom somehow found out that the Italian artist who made the platter was going to be in town giving a talk. So I went to that, and at the end, people were getting items signed. I asked her if there was any way that I could possibly replace the platter, as I'd been looking on eBay, etc., for years with no luck. She told me not a chance. They only actually made very few of that particular one, so sorry. Another 5 or so years go by, and my parents are on a trip with our kids. They stopped in at a Goodwill on their way out of town, and bam, there was my platter for $5. It has a small chip in it, but it was otherwise perfect. I still can't believe it, and I am so ducking stoked to have it back. Story 19. My dad runs a flea market stall and also manages the grounds, and he finds all kinds of treasures in sheds where people don't pay their rent and get locked out. I got 2 Coach bags still in their own bags last year, and he found a 1920s Victrola a few years ago. He also made bank selling a bunch of industrial-sized versions of that machine that uses electricity to vibrate things clean. Can't remember what they're called. Story 20. I used to work at a Goodwill donation center, and someone donated a live hand grenade, and that was kind of cool. BQs, not only did the entire shopping center had to evacuate, and I got to see one of these bomb robots, but I got to go home early and still got a full day's pay. Story 21. Paid $50 for a full set of golf clubs, including the bag at a garage sale near my house. I know nothing about golf, but my dad goes semi-regularly. It was close to his birthday, and he had recently been complaining that his old clubs were falling apart. They looked new and in good condition, and $50 seemed reasonable. When I gave them to my dad, he freaked out. Apparently, the bag alone was like $800, and from what he could tell, after looking them up, the set must have cost at least $2K. They didn't appear to have ever been used before I bought them. Story 22. It wasn't the what, it was the how. I was looking through some record crates as a teenager years back. Old thrift store that was mostly knickknacks and clothes. Found a copy of Frampton Comes Alive in decent shape. $5, and it appears to be autographed. I took out my phone and looked up his signature. Yep, looks like it's authentic. Took the record to the older, middle-aged man at the counter. He glances down and comments, "Frampton, looks like it's $5. I made the comment that I couldn't believe it was autographed. His response, "Frampton's autograph?" Awkward pause. Clerk makes a disgusted sound like he's holding back vomit. $2. Story 23. For all you motorcycle riders out there, I made the frame closer to the ground, and had a problem with the OM kickstand being too long now. I searched eBay, Amazon, all the online merchants I could think of. Nada. Not even full price. After a year or so of looking, I was about to give up. Then I heard of a free hamburger thing at a motorcycle dealer about 100 miles away from where I lived. We made the trip over for our free hamburger. After scarfing down my lunch, I started browsing the store and made it to the clearance table. Most of the items were ordered for a specific project someone had, but never picked it up. There was a lot of stuff piled on the table. I dug through it and found a kickstand for my bike. As I was reading the label, it was for my bike. That had been lowered too. Wow. I grabbed that thing up, looked the sale sign. Price went half off, but today was 70% off the sale price. So it listed for just under $100 in the book, but I paid $7 for the exact kickstand that I needed but couldn't find. Only thing that would have made it better was if I would have found the $7 in the parking lot. Story 24. Not as impressive as some others, but the thing that comes to mind is a copy of This Is Knitting for 10 cents back in the late 90s. I learned how to make socks from that book, and it still has a place in my heart, because that was the tipping point towards a lifelong hobby. Story 25. Not me, but my seal shops at thrift stores for a living. The 2 picks that blow my mind the most was the original Barbie doll from the 40s or 50s with a bunch of original accessories and outfits all in a carrying case for, I believe, $79 and sold for $5K. And more recently, 2 on 100 plus troy ounce bars of the silver for $20 each. I'm not sure how much those sold for, but I imagine a damn decent amount. Story 26. 20 years ago, a yuppie couple bought a house in my neighborhood with everything in it after the elderly owner died. They had an estate sale to clear it out. The elderly owner was one of the most important importers from China post-World War II. They sold everything for fractions of a penny of what they were worth. I bought a large rosewood budded, a large porcelain foo dog, 2 rosewood planet stands, and a 4-panel screen with golden lacquer on one side and a beautiful and detailed mother-of-pearl 3D scene on the other for $6. The screen alone is now worth $35K. Story 27. Paid $10 for an original 50s tube radio at a Goodwill. Didn't work. Opened it up and a tube was loose in the socket. Works mint. I love finding old stereo equipment at Goodwills and flea markets. If we exclude all the usual stuff people are looking for, found a nice 4-cylinder Kubota diesel generator at the scrapyard for 50 bucks. Runs like new and powers my house with no problem. Story 28. An all-clad roasting pan that someone threw out after Christmas because someone had obviously torched their turkey and never bothered to clean it. I soaked it in my bathtub because it didn't fit in my kitchen sink. I gently and thoroughly loosened and picked and scrubbed the burned bits and the discoloration. I got a $400 pan for free because I walked through a wealthy neighborhood and someone couldn't be bothered to clean it. Story 29. We got a fancy, never used, $300 waffle maker for $6 at Goodwill. Another time, one of my friends found a Michael Jackson record in seemingly excellent condition. Later, it was playing in the background while we recovered from a day of snowboarding. Beat it, T, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it. After a good minute, we realized it had a scratch perfectly timed with the beat, and we laughed it off. Story 30. I have several. I love yard sailing and going to estate sales. Here's some of my finds. Craftsman Professional Series 1 drive ratchet, practically new in box. Now, this was from the 70s, 80s when their quality was top-notch. The ratchet even has a grease fitting, which I've never seen before. No, not working pressure washer. I ended up putting gas in it and ran great, and I've been using it got the last 4 years not working riding lawnmower for $50. I spent another $100 to get it running good and sold it for $450, $5,000 watt. Generator for $20 that wouldn't start, replaced the starter, and had a great generator list goes on and on. Story 31. A friend showed me a pair of combat boots at a thrift store, but I looked at them and they were really ate-to-skate boots, missing the blades. They were almost brand new for $20, so I tried them on and they fitted perfectly. When I went to the ice rink store to get blades for them, the manager asked me where I got them. When I told her $20 at a thrift store, she was surprised and told me that the brand of skate boots go for $1,000 to $2,000 from the company. She said they're not sold in stores because it's a brand for elite and professional skaters. I was so glad to find them and that they fit me, as these are real leather and the inside is padded well for warmth and sturdiness. I'm not young anymore, so the sturdiness and quality of these skates will last me a lifetime. I took figure skating lessons as a kid up until I was 21. My grandma had bought me my last pair of skates that I had for years after I stopped due to injury. However, I had to leave my old skates and other stuff behind due to a domestic violence situation. So when I found these professional skates years later and they fitted me perfectly, it felt like a miracle. Story 32. While I was away in the Army sometime around 2002, my mom, now an empty nester, moved into a little 111 apartment with not much room for things and stuff, so she downsized. Only she didn't tell me she was moving, which created small admin issues with the Army, and she gave away a bunch of Christmas decorations I was hoping to inherit when this day came. Fast forward to Christmas time 2023, and I'm casually perusing a thrift store several miles away from anywhere she might have donated things, and there I find one of the very distinct Christmas items from our old collection, so naturally I snatched it up. It's the only one of our Christmas items I can find, but it was the complete kit. All its parts were there, so it was just right, just me. Story 33. My favorite is an old HP Moreau lamp. It's a young boy and girl figure mid-stride, holding each other, and behind each is a 3-tiered electric candelabra. It's very reminiscent of 1920s movie palace decor, and I think it is 1920s and much 1940s. I've tried researching it, but I have never found this exact version of this lamp, and I do know newer models from the 1960s have a stamp this doesn't have. The candelabras were broken and repaired at some point, but it works just fine. I had seen it in my thrift for $400. Moreau lights can be $300 plus, so fair, but it wasn't selling. I was looking at it, and an employee walked up to me and said, "You can have it for $35 if you want it." And I just slowly nodded. Love the thing. Probably not worth much more than a few hundred if that, but it's so over the top and pretty. I also got a 1920s floor lamp with dry glass shade I love for $50 at a crazy estate sale. That also had huge Moreau lights for $2,000. Plus a ceiling light I need to rewire from the demolished Tivoli Theater in Chicago. Essentially, I really like 1920s lights, huh? Story 34. My very best score was a pair of paintings by California Impressionist Carl Sammons. I go to Goodwill and I find a small, well-done painting, but didn't have a phone to identify the painter, so I looked it up at home. Surprise, well worth 2+K. I figure if there was one, there may be more being put out, so I go back early the next day. Surprise, I find a second bigger one worth 8+K. No more came out after that. Another time, I found a brutalist sculpture by a famous, now-deceased artist, probably worth 3K. I got a $400 Hamilton watch for $8. Gave it away to a friend who had it stolen almost immediately. Should have kept it. I've found and sold lots and lots of high-end quality art, sculptures, etc. at multiple thrift stores. Young people don't like the old style, so they just donate it. Their ignorance my gain. I will say that it is harder and harder to find good things. Part of it is generational. All the quality made valuable stuff is no longer made. And part of it is that the stores have stepped up their game in identifying valuable items. Story 34. An old analog dark room timer made in West Germany for $5. I've used it as my kitchen cooking timer for 15 years. The ticking reminds me that there is something in the oven probably not valuable, but I love that damn thing. Story 36. Years ago, a woman posted a telescope ad on a bulletin board. Her dad was a snowbird, and one year just called her up and said, "I'm not coming back this year, sell my house and everything in it." I went to check out the telescope during her garage sale, and she said she had researched everything about it, talked to him about it, and she wanted $300 for it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember saying something that indicated I would go a little higher, but she said no, she would be happy with $300. It's an older model, but the telescope new would be about $2,500, and it had a $700 eyepiece in the box. Story 37. Not me, but a buddy of mine inherited a small house from his dad. He'd spent a lot of time on the house as a kid, and the same picture was hanging on the inside of the bathroom door for decades. After he inherited, he got curious and took it to Antique Roadshow. Turned out to be an original, unknown Diego Rivera, worth over $200. Story 38. An old house I moved into had a dugout cellar via a trap door next to the wood stove. In a corner was a wooden box with a pile of loose paper. It turned out to be something called the Encyclopedia of Practical Receipts and Processes, printed about 1870. This was a huge collection of thousands of recipes for everything from soap, shoe polish, toothpaste, explosives, furniture polish, tanning leather, curing meat, on and on and on. How to make or do all the things we take for granted now and just go pick up at the store. Many of the chemicals banned or just not available to common folks anymore. It was all there, every page, and I had it rebound. I think it was a labor of love for the binders because they did a beautiful job and only charged me like $20, which was a lot of money to me back then. Story 39, not thrift, but markdown, discount, two-step bargain. I found a jacket in Burlington. Kinda my style, kinda not. Designer label. I figured it was a knockoff or designer's down market line. I decided to take home, consider, show others, return it. Brand new, overwhelmed cashier at checkout, slowing things down, making mistakes. His supervisor was yelling at him in an unacceptable manner. He fumbled and fumbled for so long, removing the security tag. He either forgot or was irritated and intentionally didn't scan the price. Coat went into the bag for free. Genuine Halston. Can't imagine how it ever got to Burlington. Story 41. Dorothy Thorpe lucite pretzel lamp at a Goodwill for $12.99, worth about $2,200. Pierre Cardin brass swoosh table lamp at another Goodwill for $14.99, worth about $1,400. Niels Landberg for Oriforce tulip vase at yet another Goodwill for $5.99, sold for $8.04. Murano glass white swirl mushroom lamp for $16.95, also worth about $2,200. John Lewis art glass, two moon vase for $7.95, worth about $400. Tons of signed art glass from Oriforce, Murano, and numerous other glass artists. Story 41. I had moved from Ohio to Wyoming. In Ohio, on a clear day, I could look across the lake and see the Davis-Best power plant. I went with my mother to a Vincent de Paul shortly after we moved and found a pretty blue shirt. I pulled it out, and it had an anthropomorphized power plant on it with its arms raised in triumph and the caption, "The heat is on. Davis-Best nuclear power." I made Mom buy it for me, and I wore that thing to rags. Story 42. A super cute pair of leather boots that I later found out were some French brand that were over $500 new. Got them for $5 at a thrift store. They're a little worn, but honestly, that just adds character to them. Emo. Story 43. Print Gakko, made by Riso Kagaku Corp. from 1907 to 2008. This is a fully functional, now discontinued Japanese-made screen printing toy. Draw a postcard-sized picture with special carbon ink pen. Place it in an exposure frame on top of stencil material. Close the lid, camera flash bulb goes off and transfers your drawing onto the stencil. Now, you have a custom stencil that you squeegee with a light coat of ink, place on top of blank paper or t-shirt, and press your image hundreds of times per stencil. I found the complete original print Gakko starter kit at a thrift store for $15 US. I went online to find more flash bulbs, only to find out it had just been totally discontinued. A few fine art printmakers were in love with this thing and buying up anything they could find to keep theirs running. So I sold mine on eBay for $125. I'm still equipped to do traditional linoleum block printing, but not reliant on such a proprietary system. Story 44. A Nancy Pearl action figure. In the box and in good condition. Not expensive, but hard to find in person. I also regularly find cable modems, keyboards, mice, routers, and sometimes monitors that are fit for the finest of gamers for only a few bucks. Some still in the box. Usually the best are at stores in the middle of retirement communities. I figure a lot of well-off retirees ask their son, daughter, nephew, etc. to help them get set up for the internet at their home so they can video phone their grandkids. They then acquire the best stuff their younger relative can find, because that's how rich people do. Shortly thereafter, they either decide they don't want to deal with the stupid technology, or they sadly pass away and all the stuff gets thrown in a box and dropped off at Goodwill. I'm currently using an AX 3000 router, a 50+ wireless keyboard, and 3 24+ monitors. All were around $15 or less at Goodwill. Story 45. One of my coolest finds is an uncut sheet of cards from the Mask cartoon based on the Jim Carrey movie. Funny part about that one is that they were cards from a European snack that were included as a prize with the snack. I found them in the Midwest of the USA. I also have one of 3 left known to exist of the 1978 Pepsi Challenge slot car sets they used for the contest. Story 46. Not a life-changing score, but my kid wears ties at work and loves the Jerry Garcia line. We found a couple Jerry Garcias at the thrift store in perfect new condition for $2 each, $30, $40 retail. We found a 1910s treadle sewing machine base with a 1970s electric sewing machine inside. Cast iron body, perfect working condition for $15. A popular local pottery shop closed after several decades, so their products are highly collectible in the area. We visited an antique store 400+ miles from home and found 3 signed pieces in perfect condition for $50 total. Locally, they are worth easily 3 to 4 times that. A guy bought a box of 20, 30 folding and hunting knives at a live auction for about $8. Most of them were cheap junk, a few were okay, and one was a Benchmade that retails for about $200. He didn't know it was in there, he just thought the box of knives looked interesting. Story 47. My aunt was a pro thrifter. She'd find crazy things and flip them on eBay for fun money. I think in her best year she made $35K from her finds, on top of running a very successful company. Her 2 greatest finds. 1. A $4 painting of chickens in a barnyard done by someone famous for that whatever. It sold for $12K, with the proceeds largely purchasing Grandma's new Buick Park Ave. 2. A $30 belt that looked like it was encrusted with fake gems. The gems were real, and she sold it for something like $15K. She taught me to thrift and how to pay my rent, flipping designer jeans and Coach bags. I also built a large part of my hobby, Costa's game collection, through thrift, trade, and flip. Story 48. As a kid, I used to go around the house and collect all the change I could find. I'd keep it until my dad decided to go to the flea market. I'd come home with armfuls of books, like the original Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books that I'd bought for a dime or a quarter. I bought a few Thornton W. Burgess books, published between 1915 and 1925 for 50 cents each. When I was older, my little brother needed money and a chaperone for a week-long school trip. I had run out of room for all my books and ended up selling some of my books for around $1,000. It paid for our trip and gave us a couple hundred each for fun money. I immediately bought the first 5 books of the Wheel of Time series on impulse in the UNC bookstore. Story 49. Bear with me. In 1987, I took a class in the philosophy of logic. The professor's first name was Polycarp. He was a very kind and patient professor, and I thought the name was amazing. In 1991, I got a tiny little kitten and named him Polycarp. In 2002-ish, I was at a bar in a separate city. I struck up a conversation with a man who said he taught philosophy at Ohio University. It was Professor Polycarp, and he was pleased to learn that there lived a cat named after him. The very next day, I was at a thrift store and found a book of Roman Catholic saints. I opened it up to my birthday, the Feast of St. Polycarp. My birthday and the Feast of St. Polycarp starts exactly 48 minutes from right now. Story 50. None of these are really valuable things, but they're all things I truly cherish nonetheless. A bowling ball for $5. I used to be on the bowling team, but couldn't afford my own ball, so always had to use the house balls, which suck. This ball is hot pink, came with the name Ruth, but the weight and finger hole sizes are a perfect fit. I've bowled all my best games with Ruth. An immersion blender for $1. It has provided many years of delicious soups. A J. Crew down jacket for $3. Fits perfectly. Looks nice. Super warm. I have worn it through like 8 or 9 cold Boston winters now. Story 57. I was just looking at it and thinking about it last night. A globe of the moon that we got in the early 80s in a Cincinnati flea market. It's metal, dented here and there, but I've always cherished it. I think I lost the accompanying booklet that had information about the missions and landing, but the moon still sits on my bookshelf, high up where nothing can get to it. Story 52. An enormous, over-the-top 19 C's carnival glass lamp for $12. I found one very similar online for $450 asking price. A hand-painted and hennaed goatskin candle lantern from Morocco for $3. And at that time, they were going for around $100. A beautiful black cocktail dress with some of the most beautiful lace I've ever seen on it, by a designer that I can't remember the name of right offhand. Just a few months before that, I'd seen some of her clothes in the fashion section of the Seattle Times, and a basic sundress was going for $500. I paid $8 for that dress, and it looked like it was brand new. An almost new KitchenAid for $20. It just needed to be adjusted, and the lady thought it was broken. Going price for those right then was about $350. Story 53. Recently, I've been finding stuff in a store that I assume came from the same person. A $500 Sass and Bide cape for $12, a $250 Saba top with tags still on the $8, and both in my size, pretty happy. Also, years ago, I found a tea strainer spoon someone had made out of 2 teaspoons. It clips open and you put the tea in, then stir it like a spoon. I love it, and it's super convenient. I still use it to this day. I'm glad someone took the time to make it. Story 54. Have found many things, but my best story is walking into a thrift store with my daughter and seeing the $800 high school dance dress we donated the week before on a young lady twirling in front of a mirror. We told her it was only worn once, and she looked so beautiful in it. And she explained she thought she wouldn't bother going to her school dance BC. She didn't have money for anything pretty, but now I'm going to make sure to walk past the rich girls real slow. She was glowing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I have always donated instead of selling our clothes. Oh, and the dress was $20. Story 55. My couch. I bought it from a furniture thrift store in my town. It's red, pink, and gold satin stripe that reminds me of the old school ribbon hard candy. It's the old Chippendale shape. It's subjectively ugly, but I love it. Almost perfect condition. This exact type of couch retails online for almost $3,000, and I paid $120. Story 56. A few weeks ago, I was at an antiques collective in my town, browsing the stalls with my wife. A handmade pottery casserole dish on a shelf full of other glazed knickknacks caught my eye. I recognized the glaze and the overall structure of the casserole dish, so I picked it up and turned it over to see if there was a signature on the bottom. I was right. My mom had made it. I called her up. She lives 400 miles away and at 85 stopped doing pottery some time ago, and she said she has no idea how that piece could have ended up in my small Northern California town. It's mine now. They're 9. Story 57. My best find so far. Robinson and Leadbeater America bisque porcelain statue from the mid-1800s. $20. Someone's garage at an estate sale. A black bear hide in perfect condition with claws. $30. Someone's garage at an estate sale. A WU1 era Imperial German sawback, butcher's blade bayonet, no sheath. Looked like it had been stored in a barn for 100 years, but still decent. Saw still sharp. $65. Flea market. A 1920s era Radinizer radium water jar with intact source. $40. Estate sale. I didn't keep this one. It was putting out between 4 and 6 millirim per 4 per hour. Original Carol Wald oil painting, about 5 feet by 4 feet. $200. Estate sale. They thought it was ugly. Story 58. I have a knack for picking up used books at thrift stores, garage sales, estate sales, wherever, but not just any old books. The books my fingers find are autographed. I have autographed books by Neil Gaiman, Tom Clancy, Elie Wiesel, Salman Rushdie, Connie Francis Shack, his basketball card, not a book, Dave Barry, Isaac Asimov, Tom Wolfe. Some of these books I paid as little as a quarter for, and the most I think was $10. Story 59. Does OfferUp count? I went to this gorgeous secluded area of LA to pick up an incredible Moroccan bone inlay table that I have seen similar ones go for $4,000 for only $95. My favorite part is Ted Danson and Mary Steenburgen walked up to the house coming home from a walk as I was leaving, so I consider it a pretty sweet deal. I love my Ted Danson table. Story 60. I found an $800 pair of Yves Saint Laurent pants in my size at the Goodwill Good Sense store 15 years ago. The store sold clothes by weight, so they cost me less than $1. I only knew it was a luxury brand because I heard Kanye West talking about it. I wanted to keep them for myself, but someone showed me them selling online for $400+ still. So I sold them for that much online after wearing them out to the club once. Wearing them solidified my decision to sell because it seems stupid to have on an $800 pair of pants and not have people even know it. Story 61. Needed a hard drive and paid $50 for it. It used to belong to the city. They didn't wipe it correctly, and with forensics tool, there was the parking pass for city employees' specs, with the pre-calculated color mix for security elements until 2030. Been enjoying free parking in the city ever since, and I can't get a parking ticket because of it. Story 62. I found this knit sweater with a pheasant hunting dog on it. It was $85, so kinda costly, but it's so unique and I love it. I also found the game Kismet, the precursor of Yahtzee, from the 60s, and it still has a bunch of scorecards. It's a hit at family game night. Endless entertainment for $2. Lastly, I got a zebra riding toy from Fisher-Price for free. It was listed on a local Facebook group as a first-come, first-serve item. I took it home, cleaned it up, put in new batteries, and gave it to my nephews for Christmas. Story 63. I got a Prada duffel bag at Goodwill for like $8. It has a top seam a bit ripped, but it's barely noticeable and an easy enough fix. And if the inner lining is any indication, that sucker is the real deal. Story 64. The lowest stakes answer. In high school, I found a pair of the most trendy and killer jeans on the sale rack at a fancy department store for $6. I was hot HT for the rest of school. Story 65. I was at a Goodwill, and I found this goblin plushie. It looked like something from Brian Froud. He's an artist and illustrator. In particular, he's the conceptual artist behind The Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. As a pop cultural phenomenon, people know his art and his goblins even if they don't know him. Anyways, it was also an FAO Schwartz and only 99 cents. So either way, I was getting a high-quality plushie for $1. Went home, did the research, and I was right. It was a limited edition goblin line designed by Brian Froud. Still one of my favorite plushies and favorite finds. Story 66. Fun story. My grandpa gifted my mother a cookbook and wrote a sweet sentiment in it for her. While my mom appreciated it, she didn't like the recipes in it. She kept it for years, and a few years after her dad passed, she gave it away to a church garage sale. While her friend was at the garage sale, saw this cookbook, not knowing it used to be my mom's or that she donated it, bought it and gifted it back to my mom, saying, "It reminded me of you." So now the cookbook stays. Story 67. I went to a rather large estate sale with my college girlfriend years back. This house was massive, and we both started at one end and took off. I've played guitar since I was 8, so I'm always looking for a new addition. I had browsed around, and in a closet against the wall, I found a rather large tweed Fender case. My heart dropped into my stomach as I could only wonder what was in it. Opened it up. A 1972 Fender Stratocaster that was pristine and appeared never played. I walked out the door with it for $250. Story 68. A box of 300 Hoscale, 187, model Volkswagens from the 1960s for $3. Was a cool find to begin with, but I've been collecting toy and model V-Bows since I was 4, so it was really exciting. I sold a bunch of the duplicates on eBay in the late 90s and early 2000s for really good money, like $30 or $50 USD each. Also a pair of brand new steel-toed Doc Martens in my size. For those boots lasted me close to 5 years in an automotive repair shop environment. Story 69. Mine is odd. After passing, my dog's ashes have been in a bag in a closet at my mom's house. One day I went out with the intent to find some type of urn for him so I could bring some of his ashes home, but I wasn't sure if I'd actually find the right container. I went to a couple shops and finally found the perfect little home for him. It doesn't really look like anything special, I guess, but it felt like the right thing, and I'm happy to have my dog home again. Story 70. Everyone in here with $1,000 paintings and original Barbies, and here I am happy to have found CD copies of Disintegration and Wish by The Cure for $2 a pop. I'm still hunting for a copy of Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. Story 71. A signed first edition, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway in near mint condition. Got it for 99 cents at Salvation Army. Knew it was legitimate the moment I set eyes on it. I seriously thought I was on candid camera or something. Left my whole cart and went and paid for it. I wouldn't hand it to the lady at the register. I was afraid she wouldn't give it back. Walked out of there feeling like I'd robbed a bank. Story 72. A thick, heavy leather Burberry hunting jacket. The body is brown and the collar is black. I paid $40 for it. It's worth about $4. Pretty sure someone's grandpa died in it. Story 73. I have 2 similar stories from the same location. First, I got an exact copy of the pink glass lidded candy dish that my meal got from her grandmother and gave it to her for Mother's Day a few years ago. So now she has a matched set. This fall, I got the exact same tiered cut glass graduated trays that my mother got as a wedding gift. She broke the middle tier of hers, and this one has all 3 intact. Weird. Story 74. $1,000. Cheetah print long winter coat. A lady was going to donate as I was donating. It was my birthday, and she was so happy that it was going to me, and that her mom, the original owner who just died, would love to see it repurposed for a man. It's my celebration pimp coat now. And then a old school Green Stanley thermos story 75. I used to be in the junior league. Yeah, shut up. And we volunteered in our thrift store. It was amazing what I got. Someone decided their punk days were over and I picked up a bunch of pairs of docks for about $5 a pair, including a pair of baby docks that I bought for my nephew. There were Vera Wang bridesmaids dresses. It was the 2000s. So many Coach purses. I almost always came home with stuff I found. Story 76. How about the one that got away? Several years ago, apparently 2012, I saw an odd painting of an owl-like creature. I looked at it for a moment, considered it, then walked on. A few weeks later, it was on the news. It was a Picasso. It eventually sold for $7K. Story 77. Wife worked at a thrift store, and going through a bag with socks among the treasures was 650 shun hidden in one of the socks. The office kept it in the safe for a couple of months. When no one claimed it, they gave it back to her, just in time for Christmas shopping. Always figured it probably was money from selling substances in school, and the owner couldn't say anything to their parents about it being missing. Story 78. I am a part-time stamp dealer. If you know what you are doing in any field, you'll have stories. Often I can buy a banker's box of old assorted covers for $50 and pull out one or two worth that. Recently, at a show, I bought a $4 cover from a dealer that's worth $2,500. I'm one of few who knew what it was. Of course, he probably paid 10 cents. Story 79. Bought a necklace at Savers for $5, thinking it was a really nice knockoff of those Diamond Journey necklaces. Got it home to find it stamped 14K gold, and according to an inexpensive tester, they're actually diamond. Similar looking necklaces with stones of that size start at $1,200. I plan to take it in one day and have them properly tested and checked, and the whole thing cleaned. Until then, I enjoy the idea of such a major win. Story 80. I found a very heavy linked enameled necklace for $1 at our local reuse. I did a Google reverse image search when I got to the parking lot and it was worth over $550. I sold it on eBay for $400. I told the cashier next time I went, and they ended up using my example for training new employees to scour for valuable items and putting them on eBay. I regret ever opening my mouth. What's the coolest thing you found in an antique thrift store or Goodwill? Story 1. A Louis Vuitton duffel bag that I bought for $8. Was very sure it was fake, but said, "Duck it." Turns out, I was in fact real, and I rocked it as my hand luggage for the plane for the 2 years I had it. Sold it for €400 a few months ago. Story 2. My grandfather always had this glass mug that I loved. It was a thick orb-shaped clear mug with a frosted image of the map of the world on it. He would always drink his scotch out of it, despite it having a little chip in the rim. He loved that mug. He passed about 5 years ago, and I made sure I wound up with that mug. Last year, I was in an antique store and found a complete set of them. They were apparently a promotional set from Nestle for Nescafe. I got the whole set for something crazy, like $7. Now I have a complete set for my bar, and I still drink my scotch out of the one with the chip in the rim. Not crazy in terms of value, but it was pretty great specifically for me. Story 3. I found a box full of musket parts for $30 last year at a local antique store. Got home, pieced it together, and it's an original 1860s 3-band 1853 Enfield musket. Despite the stock being in a horrible condition, the fact that it's original and not a reproduction makes it worth far more than $30. Story 4. Back in 1978, I visited a secondhand store in Chahali's with my parents while we waited to meet someone next door. The topic of stamp collecting came up with the owner, and he pulled out a full-size paper grocery bag full of stamps and said we could have the whole bag for $10. My dad bought it. I had just started stamp collecting, and this were enough stamps to keep us busy for years. As it turns out, the whole bag was from the 40s, 60s, all Eastern European, Russian, and Nazi stamps, and clearly from another collector, with lots of special issue plates, special commemorative issues, stamps from countries that no longer exist too. I still have the albums we arranged, and Scott cataloged them in. Story 5. I found a New York City almanac for $5. It was published in the 30s. It was amazing. It had information about all the neighborhoods, all the hotels, restaurants, clubs, and the prices of everything. I also found an autograph book from the 50s. It was full of signatures and poems from high school kids. It was really neat. The book was owned by a boy, and a couple of the rhymes and autographs alluded to a crush he had on a girl named Sandy. Towards the back of the book, there was an autograph from Sandy. I always wondered if it was the same girl and if they ended up together. Story 6. I go to estate sales a few times a year as I run an antique booth in a local store, and I've found a few interesting things. One of my favorites is when we came across an old briefcase in a barn, and inside was a ton of old papers. We ended up getting it for about $1. Later, we opened up a bottle of wine and went through all the papers. There were tons of old letters, mostly from the 50s, 70s. The woman was a middle-aged widow who kept in touch with a few family members, a friend in Cuba, and also had a few pen pals. A few letters in, we came across a romantic letter from a foreign military man. He said that he wished to write the letter in English, despite it not being his native tongue, so that she would hopefully better understand him. He professed his love and told her how much he missed her, how he longed to hold her again. His name was Federico. Our hearts swelled, and we hoped to find other such letters. We found letters from her grandchild, which were always enclosed in colorful decorated envelopes. Her drawings progressed as she aged, and in the 70s they became peace signs and slogans against war. The woman from Cuba wrote of mundane daily activities. There was one relative who spilled juicy family drama. Then we came across another love letter, not from Federico. As we went through the letters, something started to take shape. This widow frequently sought male military pen pals and seemed to be seeking a new husband. There was one man who wrote about how he did indeed fancy her, but in no way saw himself getting into any sort of serious relationship with her. Another man wrote about how, no, he had not left his wife yet, but he could not stop thinking about their passionate lovemaking, and he included a lock of his hair. Sometimes the letters from men would include her original letter, so we were able to read her side as well. Sometimes it made me feel very sad for her. She seemed quite desperate to fall in love, though it never seemed to work out. We never found another letter from Federico, and I imagine him carrying the memory of her in his heart, and always wondering what could have been. Or perhaps his letters stopped because he realized he was one of many, or because he tried to sweep her away and she declined. We will never know.